Hare Krishna. Welcome.
Hare Krishna.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Books Are the Basis, the week September 22nd to 28th, just after the Bhadra Purnima. And we are very fortunate to have three exalted disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada with us today. And my name is Balimardan Das from ISKCON Ministry of Educational Regional Secretary from North America. And I'd be happy to facilitate these panel discussions about books at the basis and how we get benefit out of it. So before we start this program, I would like to introduce three of them, those who do not know. So with me, Akurunath Das, Nagapatni Devi Dasi, and Jagrini Devi Dasi, three of them are there. So let me start with Akurunath Prabhu. So Akurunath Prabhu joined ISKCON in 1976 when he was just 17 years old. And he joined the Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan bus with Potomac and also on Gaur Purnima Day. He was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1977. He was an avid reader and studied Srila Prabhupada's books and as a book distributor on traveling Sankirtan throughout Western Canada and Southeastern US. He distributed books in St. Louis, Vancouver, Los Angeles, and in 1981, he attended University of Maryland and then to University of Michigan Law School to complete his JD. He has been practicing attorney for 34 years. In private practice, the last 15 years serves in ISKCON's Prevention of Leadership Misconduct Office. He provides legal counsel for ISB and Berkeley temples, continues to be an avid reader of Srila Prabhupada's books, and also he is married to Jagrini Devi Dasi. So in continuation of this, I will give an introduction about Jagrini Devi Dasi. She joined Los Angeles Temple at the age of 19 after meeting Satswarup Maharaj in Santa Cruz in February 1973. She took initiation in May that same year by Srila Prabhupada and also received second initiation on the Christmas Day same year from Srila Prabhupada. She had three sons, and also when she was 24 years old and served in Los Angeles Temple in cooking, sewing, DDs, and many other services. Especially she was running a nursery school and taught in the Gurukul in Los Angeles. And also she has designed the Bhakti-Vedanta hospice in Vrindavan and monthly preaching programs at Santa Cruz before the ISP started here in Bay Area in Silicon Valley. So then also he was very meticulous in designing the foregoing constructions of ISP temple here. I've been also personally know both of them in the board of directors in ISB. And also she is the CPO, the child protection office point contact from ISB, and ISKCON Ji-bi-si deputy. Also we have with us Nagapatni Devi Dasi. She joined in Laguna Beach in 1969. She's very old in terms of before 70, and with her husband. And then after moving, she moved to Los Angeles Temple. That is the core three of them, pretty much from that same area. So their service, Nagapatni Devi's service was watching the children and also the daycare, book distributions for the mother program, and also until he has to wait for initiation until February 71 by Srila Prabhupada. Lately, she took care of Rukmini Dwarkadhish, sewing and dressing the dam. They started teaching in the Gurukul in 75 and opened a temple in Vishalia and San Luis Obispo, California. Since 2009, she's been traveling Europe and Eastern Europe to preach and put on different types of seminars. Now teaching in BHI in Vrindavan and doing different lines of classes for Russian language. So having said that, we are very fortunate to have these exalted devotees around us. And I would be starting with the questions around books, why books are so important and why we need to know about it. So I will start with Akurunath Prabhuji. Just I would like to check with you, Prabhu. As you joined in 76, so how did you connect to ISKCON through your first sets of books of Srila Prabhupada? What were your reactions and how did you feel? Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, well, the books were very important for me in joining ISKCON. I was a reader. I read science fiction and fantasy books and Tolkien, Hobbits, sword and sorcery genre books and things like that. And I was always interested in like world culture, different cultures and things. So naturally, I was interested in Ramayana. And when I met devotees, Krishna book and so forth. And I remember that one day I used to see Hare Krishna devotees on college campus. We even went in my high school or junior high. We went to the temple in Miami and we chanted, and I liked devotees. And one day I was in the grocery store and there was a devotee with a dhoti and kurta on, shaved head, Sika. And I said, "Oh, Hare Krishna." So he was surprised that I, introduced myself that way. And he took me back in the parking lot. He was traveling around. He had a little kind of Winnebago camper that he was living in. His name was Urukram Das. He's since become a sannyasi named Padmanabha Swami. And he gave me a Bhagavad Gita. And he gave me a little prasadam. He made some like bananas and sour cream or something and let me eat something. And I started reading that Bhagavad Gita. And I was on an airplane. When I was reading, I wasn't getting it, but I was reading it carefully, trying to really understand Bhagavad Gita. And I was reading chapter 10. The airplane was from, I guess, Miami, Florida to Atlanta. And when I got off at Atlanta, when I was reading chapter 10, it all of a sudden made a big impression on me that Krishna was, when he was describing how he was the best of everything, his vibhuti manifestations, I start to get a feeling that now I know how God is a person and it's Krishna. And then I saw a book distributor in the airport and he had a wig on. So I was used to seeing Hare Krishna devotees with their shaved heads, and I was always a little bit, that they were a little off-putting. But this young man was nicely dressed and clean cut. He had a short hair wig on, and he distributed to me the 6th canto, part 1, with the story of Ajamil, which had just come out in 1976. And so then he convinced me to stay. I was changing planes, but he convinced me to stay in Atlanta for 3 days over the weekend at the temple. And I went to the whole morning program. I tasted Charanamrita, I chanted japa in the morning, and attended the Srimad Bhagavatam class. And so I have to say that the books came alive for me. Then in Gaur Purnima, shortly thereafter, I was in the Potomac, Maryland temple to celebrate Gaur Purnima. Jayananda was there from the bus. And I remember that we were taking prasadam in the morning the next day. And while we were taking prasadam, someone was reading from Krishna book. And I remember he read the story of Muchukunda and how, the rays of fire emanated from his eyes and burned up Kalyavana. And it all started to feel very real to me, so it was the books. It was the books definitely that attracted me in that way.
Thank you very much, Shakranath Prabhuji. So may I ask Nagapatni Mataji if you'd like to share how did you connect ISKCON with the first exposure of Srila Prabhupada's books?
Well, actually, I was also a little put off by the devotees there. It looked just very odd, and they seemed really extreme. But I was searching, and I was reading a lot of books. I was reading like the Tao and Siddhanta, and my last book I read before I started Srila Prabhupada's was the Ramakrishna. And to me, it was like, it sounded good, but it was like eating cotton candy. It just dissolved after you read it. It didn't have any meaning or any application. And so the first book, I actually saw Srila Prabhupada before I purchased any of his books. And it was so amazing how he answered all these questions I'd had for years, searching for answers for. I was kind of driven by those. And then I got the little purple Bhagavad Gita, because my thought was, I'm just going to get some of these books, learn how to cook, and go on my way. And reading the Bhagavad Gita was like the heart getting hit with lightning. It just, every verse, every purport, there was so much illumination, so much information, so much practical application to one's life. It definitely caused me to want to stay and learn a lot more. I'm still here.
Thank you very much. I know it is both of you and Akunath Prabhuji exposure is likely Bhagavad Gita. So I would like to ask maybe Jagrini Mataji the same question. How did you connect ISKCON through your first set of books of Srila Prabhupada?
Well, somewhere along the line, I must have seen a Bhagavad Gita, because I remember one of the pictures in the book, and I had been reading. I was raised Catholic, and religion was a big part of my life, as a child. And as a teenager, I had all these questions that weren't being answered. In fact, when I asked the questions, I had two of my dad's sisters were nuns. And I remember asking one of them, why does God do different things to different people? It doesn't seem fair. A child born over here is wealthy. A child born over here could be in terrible distress And I was basically told to just don't ask so many questions and just have faith. Frustrating. And then Eastern philosophy started trickling in. So I was reading, remember, Be Here Now, books on impersonalism. And at one point, I remembered seeing this picture in the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't remember where I was exposed to it, but I remember I was with 4 friends, one of whom was near Kula at the time. And I said, I want to go to that Hare Krishna temple. I want to get that book. That book's important, and I want to read that book. And I went to the Brooklyn Temple, and I met Vaikanis there, who has since passed away. And he spoke to us for a little while and gave us a Bhagavad Gita. He gave me a Bhagavad Gita. And we had we were from Brooklyn, but we had moved to California. And this was a trip that we took by car back to New York for a short visit. So while in New York, I got this Bhagavad Gita, and we were driving back to California shortly after that. So the whole way back, I was in the car just immersed in this Bhagavad Gita. It was fascinating. It was answering all these questions that nobody else would answer for me. And by the time we got back to California, very close, we were staying in Santa Cruz, and in Ben Lomond, very close to where we lived, Satsvarup Maharaj was there. And he was giving evening classes on Gita and Krishna consciousness. And myself and Nirkula and a few other friends were interested, and we would go every night. We'd go listen to Maharaj. So I'd already read the whole Gita at this point. It was the old Gita, the first one, the little one, because this was probably in 1970, probably the beginning of 70, end of 72, beginning of 73, something like that. Anyway, Maharaj told us, because we were so interested, we were asking relevant questions, and we were just so happy learning this philosophy. Maharaj asked us if we'd like to come and live at a Hare Krishna temple. And we said, yes, absolutely. So he called Karundar in Los Angeles, and they made arrangements for us to have apartments. And he came and picked, actually what he did was, at first, he wanted to just come to our house and teach us how to live as devotees at home. The idea of joining a temple hadn't yet come up. But when he came and saw how we were living in like this little abandoned cabin in the woods with no running water and no electricity, it was his idea. Hey, want to come join the Hare Krishna temple? And we agreed. We were so excited, and he made the arrangements. We piled into his van, and he drove us to Los Angeles, and that's how we began our Krishna consciousness. We were initiated within a few months, but it was the Bhagavad Gita that brought me.
Excellent, Mataji. I think Bhagavad Gita, as both three of you had the same commonalities. Maybe let me ask Nagapatni Mataji one more thing. How do you use the books in your preaching activities when you are now traveling in Europe, East Europe, and Russia, and many other parts? So how do you think these books are useful in your preaching activities? Would you like to give some examples?
Well, and books are very much a part of my life. I still teach on Zoom classes all over the world. And I do individual study classes. So the books are a major part because everything I say, it has to be the same as what Srila Prabhupada said. I can't teach something different, so I have to know this. Actually, the best way to learn this philosophy, to learn anything, is to teach it, because then you have to learn it very well. So the books, I definitely read them all the time. And just for living, there's so many instances, and I find if I'm reading, answers come, explanations come, understanding comes. It works together with life.
I see. So you find at least very useful. I know, and also Akunath Prabhu, I've been knowing him through social media and online platform. So maybe I would like to hear from you, Akunath Prabhu. How do you use these books in your preaching activities? Would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, well, particularly Bhagavad Gita, people know me in my profession that I'm a Hare Krishna devotee. Even though I, make it a point not to be one of those annoying people who are constantly proselytizing. Although if I just did what I wanted to do, I would just be talking to people about Krishna all the time. But I have to be sensitive to how they would feel about that, and they would make fun of me and hated me. But I have to say that having these books, sets us apart from just the personality cults of people who find some saint who has some personal magnetism or something, that we have authorized scriptures. And Prabhupada emphasized that during the 1970s when there were deprogrammers who were, trying, there was an anti-cult movement, that people were afraid that all our young Americans were becoming members of different cults like Charles Manson, or, sometimes dangerous cults like in the later, after Prabhupada passed away, I think 78 or 79, there was that Jim Jones, and people became very afraid of this stuff. And of course, we were, as Hare Krishnas with the shaved heads and men used to wear long hair in those days. So we kind of stood out with our sikas and our robes, and they would always lump us in with the cult. And I remember that Mukunda Goswami was working on, attacking or defending ourselves against the anti-cult movement by saying, don't lump us in. And Prabhupada had instructed us in court cases and so forth that we would present these books and show the judges, and they would be, see that these were authentic books with professors writing things on the blurbs on the dust covers and things like that, that these were authentic books about an authentic ancient tradition. And but I can talk about it. And when I started distributing Bhagavad Gitas, most Americans really hadn't heard of Bhagavad Gita. Now it's become a household word that students have to study it in high school in some places and things. And so, like, I was with this lawyer yesterday. We're preparing for a trial, a very distinguished civil rights attorney, and he was mentioning that our case number for our case is a good number because he did like this numerology thing on it, and he added the numbers together, and then he added the digits, and he said it comes out to 6, and he said 3, 6, and 9 are these important numbers. And I said, oh yes, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes that material nature works in 3 ways: for creation, maintenance, and destruction, or goodness, passion, ignorance. And I was explaining it all to him, and he was fascinated by it because Bhagavad Gita is now something that people are interested in. So I was saying that these 3 ways, then these 3 qualities of matter expand in different mixtures to 9 and 81 and by the powers of 3. And he said, oh yes, because he believed in this numerology about the power of 3. So it comes up because I'm always thinking about the Gita. It always comes up in conversation, and people will listen when I say, oh, Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says this or that. They're interested in what he says.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah. So how do you think, Jagrini Mataji, from your perspective, because you are part of the better half of Akranath Prabhuji. He has been preaching so heavily, and he is so deep into the scriptures and all. So how do you think this book is helping you in your preaching activities?
Well, I'm not very good at memorizing verses, whereas Akranath is expert at that. He can tell you where every verse was in every book. You could start a verse and he'll finish it for you. For myself, it's more about the philosophy. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita to approach a spiritual master. And we all did that. And that made us really happy. And that gave us the ability to understand the philosophy. And the reading Srila Prabhupada's books is further instruction from him, further guidance from him. And I more and more, as I get older and older, I completely understand it's not enough to just chant and not read Prabhupada's books, because we need to approach a spiritual master. We need the instruction of a pure devotee. And even if we're not reading, get up in the morning and do this, to this, to this, to this exactly each day, having read Prabhupada's books, we actually do know what to do every day. We know what to eat every day. We know how to stay clean. We know about goodness, passion, and ignorance. We know about Krishna as the taste of water, the light of the sun and the moon, and holding up the planets. And so when you read Prabhupada's books, it becomes a part of your life. It becomes a part of your every waking moment. The more you read, the more aware you are of Srila Prabhupada's guidance and Krishna's words.
Excellent. It's a kind of abhyasa yoga ekthena chidasa anandagamina paramam purusam. So I would jump into many people, as our Vaisesika Prabhu mentioned, ISB, individual, spontaneous, and volunteer individual. So we like to know not only preaching activities, we do all missionaries activities with the help of the scriptures. But I would like to know how in a personal situation, in a crisis, in a dilemma, in a very difficult times in your life, how did you really use these teachings of Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam or Prabhupada's literature? If you like to give a particular instance or example and how the scriptures, the books help you, so that would be really helpful for us. Maybe starting with Akranath Prabhu.
Well, that's an interesting one. When I'm really in a crisis, I normally, rather than go to the books, I pray to Krishna, Lord Chaitanya. I have, or Lord Nrsingadev, I have an image, a direct image, but I'm always trying to see through the eyes of scripture. So, I always, try to think of myself that I'm spirit soul and that I'm not this body and that these senses are, pulling me in different directions, but they are coverings of the real spirit soul, and that and the mind and the senses and the intelligence are sitting places of lust, and so many things that we read and remember that helps us see that way. And I do. Jagarini mentioned I remember verses. I don't know that I do as much as she glorifies me. But that's one thing that I do, even when I don't have that much time for reading, is I recite chapters of books of Gita. I learn to recite them from memory, but when I go back to them, I'm a little rusty, so I have to relearn them. But I'm reading the purports along with the verses and deeply thinking about the word for words. Prabhupada gave us in this genius way. He gave us the word for word so we could learn the Sanskrit. And I think that that makes me always think that way, so that when I'm in a crisis, I try to react like a spirit soul and like a devotee would react. And even though I don't have that great devotion to Krishna or whatever, I have that philosophical foundation that, life, happiness and distress come like winter and summer seasons, and that, that this is just temporary, and what's really enduring is Krishna consciousness. So Lord Krishna and our connection, our eternal relationship with him, and that we have an eternal identity as his servant, and that this other stuff is external and ephemeral. It will come and go.
Excellent. As you know, many popular prayers like Gajendra Moksha, Kunti prayers, or Draupadi's prayer, or wherever it is.
Yes,
Very
and
nice.
we learn those, like that's, instead of just learning one verse here and one verse there, I've learned that if you can learn the whole prayer,
Yeah.
that and recite the prayer, it's remembrance also. You're studying, you're hearing, you're reciting it, you're chanting, but you're actually, when you learn to do it that way, you actually are also privy to like the emotions of Queen Kunti or Arjuna and Krishna, what they're, how Arjuna is astonished and he starts glorifying Krishna. You feel that. So it's real reading. It's not just like some scholarly activity to study some book and learn something, but it's actually a way of communing with Krishna, just like chanting japa is.
Yes, I do. So how about you, Nagapatni Mataji? How do you really use in your personal life?
Prayer definitely is my first action. Pray to surrender, pray to understand what Krishna's plan is, pray to have the spiritual wherewithal to deal with whatever is challenging. But sometimes I did this the other day. There was something challenging, and I just went to the Bhagavad-Gita and opened it up. And Krishna says, I'm subduer of everything within time. And I thought, oh, that's perfect answer. So he'll subdue this difficulty as well as everything else. So sometimes I do that, or I'll keep reading. Then I'll keep reading. If I open it up and I didn't get an answer with that where it opened, I'll just keep going until I get an answer. And Super Soul, I think he, like Karna says, he communicates with us. And the easiest way for him to communicate with us is through the books.
Excellent. So did you find the outcome, likely by the power of prayers, you found at the end that you healed, or Krishna listens to your prayer? Did you feel satisfied? Yes. With the
I would sometimes, when I've been in the real dark night of the soul, I'd write a letter to Srila Prabhupada telling him all my troubles. And I put it on my Murti and his Vyasa-san. Well, one time years ago, I was going through a really challenging, difficult time. And I guess I wrote this letter, and somehow it fell down behind the whole altar. And I didn't even find it again until I moved. I forgot about it. And when I pulled it out and read it, I started crying, because even though at that time I couldn't understand what Krishna's plan was, it was really wonderful. And so it's helped me understand that things happen and they may look like they're challenges, they're difficulties, but they may be blessings in disguise. So we never know what Krishna's plan is, but we have to have that faith that Krishna has our best interest in mind, and he wants us more than when we want him, really.
Thank you very much, Mataji. So Jagrini Mataji, would you like to also give some of your personal crisis, and how did you manage to deal with the books?
Well, gosh, they said it all, both Nagapatni and Akurnath. The philosophy that you imbibe by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, it gives you perspective when you have difficulties, so that you can perceive those difficulties are temporary. It's not even just you're convincing yourself or telling yourself or trying to distract the intensity of the situation, but you actually perceive that that's not what's important. That's not, no matter how bad it can get for you. And I've had some difficult times. There's still something more important that you are connected to. that continues steadily, and you understand that whatever it is that's causing distress will pass. So that's philosophically. And then, of course, as you mentioned, reading the prayers of Queen Kunti, how she welcomed distress, because those are the times when she could think about Krishna even more. Because you get caught up sometimes in happiness and you forget, you're just oblivious. But when you're in distress, you're that's the first place you're going to go, is Krishna's lotus feet. And my experience has been that life then becomes bittersweet, because there's this bitterness going on with your whatever the problem is that you're having, but the sweetness comes through, that Krishna's comfort somehow comes through. And like Nagapatni said, I've experienced time and time again that when things looked really, really dark and you don't understand why Krishna is doing something, that if you just have faith that he's your well-wisher, he always manages to manifest how it was beneficial for you to have those things happen. And I've experienced that time and time again. And I think what Krishna is doing for us by doing that is making us comfortable and assuring us that he's guiding us through life. He's guiding us through Prabhupada in our lives too. Because if you think about it, we're all going to die. And nobody wants to think about that or talk about that, especially in America, right? In India, you pass the Ghats and you see death a lot. You see old age. You see all this is raw everywhere. In America, it's all hidden. It's all just very clean and neat and behind closed doors. Even in a funeral, they take the body and they pump it up and they put makeup on it and they dress it all up so that even death doesn't even have to appear as death, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's the reality of what's going to happen. And it's not an easy thing to have to leave our body. So what's going on with these books is we're getting the inner strength. We're getting we're building our relationship with Krishna, our love for Krishna, our confidence that we can let go when the time comes and Krishna will guide us. All those things are happening with the help of Srila Prabhupada's books.
Yes, I think Akurnath would like to add some comments. Please, Prabhuji.
Yeah, I don't know who all the audience is, but of course we want to make the point that, in many religions around the world, people have a tendency to pray like that they think of God as the order supplier, that somehow or another, he's a big, powerful person and our lives are most important. And, if he doesn't give us what we want, then we get angry or we get frustrated. And when we mention the prayers of Queen Kunti or other prayers, when we're reading Prabhupada's books, when I first started reading Srimad Bhagavatam, I was in the temple, but I would they would have pictures and captions, and I would think, oh, these interesting far out stories, and I wanted to learn the pastimes. But associated with all of those pastimes are prayers, or most of those pastimes. There are great sections of beautiful prayers. And in these prayers, we see how devotees have a particular kind of relationship with Krishna and how they're exchanging particular kind of emotional mellows with Krishna. And normally there's a formula that the devotee says something, shows their understanding of Krishna and glorifies Krishna, and then expresses their submission to Krishna, and then asks for some benediction, but it's a benediction to help them serve Krishna better. And so it teaches them how to pray by reading the books and seeing the prayers of the great devotees, and we can follow in the way that they're praying. And so that when a devotee experiences reverses in life, they don't just think, God, why are you doing this to me? And if you were a good God, you would make me happier. They're thinking that I'm your servant, and whatever is happening to me, like it says, Tatena Kampam Susumikshimano, I should, in fact, you're giving me an easier thing than I deserve. and they understand that. So in crisis, we think of the prayers of the great devotees that we learn in the books.
Nagapati Mataji, you'd like to share on something you were saying? Yeah.
Yes, the concept provoked about Srimad Bhagavatam for me is that all life's problems are in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There is an example for every possible scenario. And so reading this, when these difficulties come in our life, we'll know the right response. So that's why it is important to read. And Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada instituted that as a morning class as part of our sadhana, and it's extremely important for us, yes.
Thank you for reminding that. So as we are coming closer to our talk, and would just like to ask my last questions, which is briefing about is there any specific advice you can share with us for improving our reading practice or coming generations to inspire to read Srila Prabhupada's books and get best benefit? So please give your concluding comments on this particular questions. Maybe starting with Jagrani Mataji.
Well, I would suggest little reading groups. You mentioned earlier that I guess when you were briefing us, you had mentioned, if there were any tips, so that sometimes reading makes you tired, or, maybe you're not as interested as you should be when you're reading. What would be the, suggestion for tips or ways to work through that? And, the practice of Krishna consciousness, well, we're actually elevating our modes of nature, right? We're doing work to elevate ourselves to the mode of goodness and beyond. And in order to do that, sometimes, the body resists. So I would suggest for young people to have reading groups. I find that to be very enlivening when you get together with devotees that you share like-minded ideas with, peers, and you can discuss. It brings the book alive more. You see more points of view, and it can become a more enjoyable experience, and you get a lot more out of it. That would be one thing I would suggest for young people. But regardless of whether you're tired or not, read earlier in the day. Read at a time when you're not going to be. What I like to do is I have, I think it's called, I can't even remember the name of the app on my phone that has all of Prabhupada's books. So if I'm sitting
BSC,
anywhere,
it's page by page, you understand?
no, it's not
Vedas.
It's not Vedas. It's not Vedas. It's not Be a Sage. Page by page. It's I can look it up really quick.
No worry,
It's
we can.
called it's called Pocket Vedas.
Okay.
Pocket Vedas, and it's a real easy app. It's got all of Prabhupada's books, and you could be sitting on a bus, you could be sitting on a train, you could be waiting at the DMV, you could be, and you have it right there with you, and you can always kind of read a verse or a chapter or whatever you'd like. It makes it easy and convenient, and you carry it in your phone.
That's excellent point, Mataji. Yeah, reading groups and Pocket Vedas and other things. Thank you. So back to you, Nagapatni Mataji. Would you like to also share any specific advice you can give to the coming generations?
Yeah, I really believe in the reading groups, and especially with one's peers. So if you're a young adult, read with other young adults. And sometimes some advice in getting these started. They're a little hard sometimes to get started. But if one person just dedicates themselves or their house, and that at that time, whenever they decide, are completely committed, even if no one shows up, they just start every week. Before you know it, people will come, and because it's steady, they will continue to come. The other thing I've always advised my students with is to put a book by your table by your bed, because so many times we can't go to sleep right away, or you wake up in the night and can't sleep. And actually, it's a good way. Just being there is a good way to remind us, this is a nice way to go to sleep, is reading this book. And then I agree with setting a time. When we set times for whatever is important in our life, right? If we go to work, there's a time we go to work. If we're eating, there's a time we're eating. So we set times for those things that are important. So reading is so important. We should set a time and commit.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the advice, Mataji. So now to Akranath Prabhuji, would you like to also give any specific advice for the upcoming generations?
Well, I like what they're saying. Nagapati said something earlier about how, that Prabhupada made it a part of our program every day to study Srimad Bhagavatam. And I noticed even on the poster for this reading interview, whatever, that, it has a quotation from Srila Prabhupada that we should study his books at least 1 or 2 hours per day. And what we had while living in the temples, the way Prabhupada set it up, is a morning Bhagavatam class and an evening Bhagavad Gita class. And so we would have roughly an hour each with, a lecture and then a question and answer session, so that we were getting our 2 hours, in addition to which we would have separate study. We would try to make separate study time, although we had our different duties to do and things. I want to talk about memorization because it's meant a lot in my life. We had one of the Srila Prabhupada's right-hand men, great leaders of the movement, named Tamal Krishna Goswami, and he was one of the devotees that was in charge of this Radha Damodar traveling bus program. And Srila Prabhupada was emphasizing the importance of learning his books and preaching like Prabhupada was doing. Prabhupada would quote a verse and explain it, or sometimes without even quoting the verse or without even telling you. That if you hear what Prabhupada's saying, he's always, once you know the books, you realize he's always speaking about, the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj or the teachings of, some particular part of the books. He's reciting things for the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. So what Tamal Krishna Maharaj did is he brought this one devotee who was very good at, he was an eccentric devotee named Kushakrata Das, who knew Sanskrit well, who translated a lot of the Goswami literature and everything. But in those days, he knew the whole Bhagavad Gita. So he gave us all like 100 verses that Srila Prabhupada quoted most of the time. And he brought them around to at that time I was in the temple in St. Louis. And he brought Kushakrata to train us how to memorize verses and to get us to get these verses. And then later different devotees told me, like, learn the second chapter to the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, get the 34, we said, because 34 verses long, and so forth. And then once we had, once I had a foundation of those verses, then when I decided to learn the chapter, it was just, I need to learn the 3 or 4 verses before the next 2 verses that I already know. So it was able to link it up. But by doing that, even if you can't get time to sit down and make time to sit down quietly with the book or to sit down with a group of devotees and discuss the book, you can, if you're commuting in your car, you can recite the verses to you, and that way you're communing with Lord Krishna's teachings and Lord Krishna's words. And you can, at night before you go to bed, you can sit down and make sure you recite 1 chapter. And then when you wake up in the morning, So we have these groups called CHAD, chapter a day, where devotees who are busy, they have children, they have to get to work, they have to get the kids to school, but they meet for a half an hour on the phone in the morning, and they recite a chapter. Either they recite the English translations or the Sanskrit, and together, and then somebody can raise some questions or discuss give some reflections. And what I've done at different times, and I haven't been doing it now, but I want to get back to it, is I would form up groups online with people where, we would read, let's say, 20 pages of Srimad Bhagavatam every day. And then, in our little group, we would each say something about, reflection from that day's reading. And so you'd be having some contact with the books, a study group online. You don't have to go to somebody's house. Nobody has to make prasadam or, do all the other things. it's time saving, and Krishna has sent us this kind of technology which can be used for good or evil, and we can use it in devotional service that way by having little groups that study Srimad Bhagavatam or Nectar Devotion. I also have to say I've watched Jagarini take classes. I watched her in amazement how Prema Tarangani was teaching Nectar Devotion classes, and even though a lot of the subject matter was beyond my realization, it was great to know how some devotees have sort of mastered it and can explain it very well through with realization, so they can explain it to the audience and answer questions, practical questions about it. So all these things are good things. And Naga wants to say something.
Yeah, you want to say something, please?
I'm so excited. Yesterday I discovered that the Chaitanya Charitamrita is a reading book form now, and I know that.
You mean audio?
Yeah, audio. And I was so excited about that because here in New Navadvip in Hawaii, it's so few devotees, so much service. And this time, there's just so hard to get a book open. But you got these reading books, so that we're so fortunate that there's so much technology that supports our Krishna consciousness now. And I like what you said, Karnath, about either use it for demoniac reasons or.
Yeah, we always use technology and hearing was so important. When in the 70s, when we all joined the movement, Prabhupada was traveling the world and giving classes and giving darshans and morning walks, and he had a tape ministry, and there was a devotee with an English accent who would say, "The following is Srimad Bhagavatam class, our class on the Srimad Bhagavatam given by His Divine Grace." And we would be in the kitchen washing pots or whatever, but that was always going on. So wherever, and it was coming out new. So we were always being excited and surprised and blown away by the new things that Prabhupada was saying and doing. And that's, when Sandipani Muni gave Krishna a benediction because he was such a nice student, Krishna had given him dakshin of reviving his son who had been killed. Krishna was a wonderful student. He could give some wonderful dakshin. And he blessed him, saying, "Whatever you say will always be fresh." And so Krishna's Nitya Nova Yavanam, his teachings and his speeches, and the Uddhava Gita, and the devotees' prayers to him, and all the pastimes, that it's always fresh and exciting. There's always a sense of adventure when you open. It's not ordinary reading. It's not like reading some novel and getting some sensual experience. You're actually getting directly in touch with internal potency, the spiritual, the platform of reality. And it's blissful, and it's nourishing, and it's exciting. Srila Prabhupada would say, you don't have to tell a hungry man how he's being satisfied by eating. There's a verse in the 11th canto where a sage is telling a king about how at every step, as you surrender to Krishna, you're experiencing bliss and freedom from material attractions, and also transcendental knowledge. Just like when you're eating, you feel pleasure and nourishment, and your hunger is satisfied. So reading is, books are the basis, and reading is actually hearing. And like Nagapatni said, if you want to preach, what do? You repeat what you've read, right? That's actually what you've read and understood. So you have to read the purports and read it carefully and make sure you understand. It's always going through your mind. And it's a way that you can stay in touch with Krishna consciousness even while you're working and doing chores and errands and things. You're thinking, something will remind you that, Krishna said this.
I know it is all wonderful, and definitely this valuable information and your realization experiences, whatever you said, will be, produced and given, shared to all the devotees around the world. So from Ministry of Education, I would like to thank you all, my deep gratitude for joining tonight and giving your valuable informations, for promoting the Books at the Basis week, which is September 22nd to 28th. I'd like to thank you again. And praying Mancha Kalpatarubhya Sister Kripa Sindhuvya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namo Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Thank you,
Gaur
Brother
Premanand.
Yadam Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.